And by the way, most of the mandates, if perfectly implemented, would not achieve the result of improving the academic potential and achievement of poor kids. In fact, some of them would actually harm the chances of that occurring, which is a little mind-boggling. In 2002, for the first and only time, the department created an Abbott division to pull all this together and to get it focused on academic achievement, not on compliance. How well are third graders reading? That's going to be the measure of whether districts are doing their job. At the time, there wasn't even a third grade test, but that was the focus that we wanted to put on it. I happened to be the assistant commissioner appointed to do this. And I was lucky, because I've only finished the first page of my notes, by the way. How are we doing? I lose track of time when I'm talking about this. How much time do I have?
We'd like to leave maybe 15 minutes for questions.
Okay, and you leave at 11:15? Oh, great, okay. So I'll take 25. Now, here was the big advantage. As you heard when Jim introduced me, I'm not an educator. I've been more a politician than an educator. In fact, I'm not an educator, although I'm teaching now, so I guess I could call myself one. But so if you ask me, well, how are you going to do this, or what should a first grade teacher be doing in April with a classroom of 21 kids who come from a poor neighborhood, half of whom come from families where no English is spoken? What should that first grade teacher do? I don't know, would be my answer. So I needed to find people who could answer those types of questions. And I was blessed by the fact that there is a school district in New Jersey which had gotten a head start on this, Union City, right across the river from Manhattan. As you head down 495 to the Lincoln Tunnel, on your left and on your right is Union City. And also Weehawken and Gutenberg. It gets a little crazy there. Union City is a town that is more densely populated than any in New Jersey, and is one of the most densely populated municipalities in the country. 75,000 people live in a little over a square mile. That's number one. Number two, it happens to be the poorest school district in New Jersey, as measured by the percentage of its kids who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. The poorest. Third, 75% of the kids go home at night to a family where no English is spoken. 96% of the kids are Latino. So, I would say that was a pretty challenging environment. And if you could solve a problem there, you probably could solve it just about anywhere. And Union City, which was worried because it's a political operation in Union City, it's Hudson County after all. The mayor appoints the board, and the mayor has a lot to say, and the mayor did not want the state doing to Union City what the state had done to Jersey City, which is to take over the school system. So in the late 80s, he called the superintendent in and he said, listen, the state is on our back. We're down near the bottom of all these poor districts. They say that there's a chance they're going to come in and take us over. That means they'll make the decision on who gets hired. They'll make the decision on who the auditor and the lawyer. We don't want that. You get the state off our backs or you're out of a job. You got 6 months to do it. Well, the superintendent actually didn't know what to do. The superintendent was basically a political guy who the mayor had put in. But he recognized that he didn't know what to do, and he went to somebody on his staff who he had a lot of confidence in, who was an Irish guy from Trenton, New Jersey, but responsible for bilingual education in Union City. And they started with this question. They started, first of all, well, in order to educate, they got to read. Why don't they read? And they started scurrying around. They went to some of the great literacy experts at Rutgers. And they found out that the gap that they had to close was the gap in language and general knowledge, vocabulary, knowing the stories that we all grow up with, because the tests and everything would reflect American culture, and these kids were from the Dominican Republic or from Ecuador or from rural Mexico or Honduras. They didn't have any of those stories at home. So they started by working with daycare centers and handing out books in Spanish, because most of the people who ran the daycare centers couldn't read English. They didn't care. They just wanted words and vocabulary and ideas and knowledge to be conveyed in whatever language. And then they found out by doing that that their kindergarten teachers began to experience kids who were arriving with a bit more vocabulary. So instead of having to start with the letters or in September, they could start with words. Big advantage. And they kept building on that. And then they found that that meant first grade teachers had to change what they did, because they were now receiving kindergarten kids who were writing and could read words and even short, simple sentences. So the first grade teachers who were making that a part of their fall instruction now had to move past that. And they kept building on it. Then they got to the fourth grade, and this was a few years later, and they discovered that, gee, the content that kids are responsible for gets more complicated, and you can't keep doing what you were doing in second grade with fourth and fifth graders. And so they began to integrate the curriculum so that the teachers would be interested in it and the kids would be interested in it. So they gradually, over time, got rid of all the textbooks, or just about all the textbooks, because they found that textbooks, which are written for the schools in Texas and California, the two largest purchasers of textbooks, won't work in New Jersey for a lot of the things that the state has now put into the core standards. So Union City was this beacon for me. There were a couple of other districts that were doing very well, West New York and Perth Amboy, both characterized by high Latino populations. So I was able to hire away Fred Carrick, the architect of the Union City program. He came down, he worked with me for 4.5 years, and he was a master. He didn't come with the answer, he came with the right question. And what we wanted to do was to work with districts to ask the question, why aren't your kids reading? What is your hypothesis about that? What would be required if we wanted to address that problem? And it might be different school to school. Let's work that out. We'll visit the schools with you. We'll agree on both the diagnosis and the prescription. And then when you need to train your teachers to behave differently than they've been behaving, we'll provide that training for them. And the districts that said, yeah, we'd like to do that, showed dramatic results. In fact, the third grade test was introduced in 2004. The first year was introduced, even Union City didn't do that well. Union City went from 64% proficiency in 2004 to 82% in 2008. Elizabeth, a big town by Jersey standards, went from 59% of its kids being proficient in 2004 to 80% being proficient. Getting to 80%, you're starting to nudge up against the state average. You're not there yet, but you're getting a lot closer.